Greetings and thanks for joining the webinar. My name is Amit Singh, and I'm the global lead for RPA and part of the leadership team for AI and data engineering at Sapient Consulting. I've been with Sapient for close to 14 years and have had the opportunity to work on large transformational programs. As we say at Sapient, we are literally at the forefront of solving some of the most challenging and complex industry problems. I'm joined by Michael Marchuk from Blue Prism. I'll let Michael introduce himself. Michael.
Thanks, you, Amit. So I'm Michael Marchuk from Blue Prism. As you mentioned earlier on here, I'm a digital technology workforce evangelist for Blue Prism, and I'm very excited to be here to support Amit in this webinar.
So before we get started, I wanted to ask the group a question and get an understanding on where are you with the RPA journey. So we'll pause for a few seconds to get answers, and then we'll move forward. Interesting. So it looks like there are none of you who have done large-scale implementation of RPA, and a substantial portion of the audience is just getting started. So it's probably the right time to talk about whether RPA is hype or real. So since the topic of the webinar is to explore hype versus reality for RPA, it is only apt that we start by looking at the Gartner hype cycle. RPA is currently at the peak of the hype cycle according to Gartner and was at the same place last year. It is expected that RPA may move to the plateau of productivity fairly quickly. There are several organizations who have already benefited from the technology and have seen substantial return of investments in a very short time span. If you look at some of the industry analyst reports and findings, you'll probably come to the conclusion that many people believe that RPA is a technology that is going to disrupt the services industry in a big way, perhaps the biggest disruption in the industry since the offshoring phenomena. McKinsey estimates that about 30% of all activities that we do today can be automated, leading to a whopping $7.5 trillion in potential rule-based work that can potentially be automated. Forrester predicts that we'll have over 4 million bots doing office work in North America alone by 2021. So all of this gives you an impression of a hype. In order to explore this further, we'll peel some layers as part of this presentation to explore how much of this is real. Well, I don't know how many of you know this, but RPA was the fourth highest word searched on Google recently. And broadly speaking, if you look at some of the reasons why RPA is so popular, there are about 5 or 6 reasons. Market forces are challenging the norm, and more organizations are realizing that the traditional operating model is no more sustainable. The volume, velocity, and variety of data is increasing across the enterprise. This is leading to a situation where jobs are becoming more and more cumbersome. The enterprise applications aren't designed to handle high volume of information, leading to a lot of time being spent in entering, validating, and managing data. Then there is a factor of technology revolution where everyone wants to do some AI. Many of them don't know where to start and end up in a situation where data and processes are not at a stage for them to be able to start their AI journey. And RPA fits front and center to the idea of technology assisting in streamlining the process and data to help with the AI journey. Technology itself has matured quite a bit and is at a point where it is more reliable and resilient. The other aspects of RPA that makes it popular are the fast implementation times and high return on investments. If you explore technology further, you'll find that process automation itself is not a new concept and has existed for several decades now. The big question on the technology side that needs to be understood is why are there so many repetitive processes in the enterprise that we haven't been able to automate for the past 2 decades? I personally believe that the answer lies in the fact that there are quite a few technological advancements in the area of capturing and processing unstructured data, and the fact that technology now comes with much better controls and enhanced security. This has led to automation being ready for business critical functions. and organizations are now using RPA to automate critical functions like accounts receivable and accounts payable. The next wave of automation is IPA, or intelligent process automation, also known as cognitive automation. The idea in this type of automation is to combine AI and RPA to move the needle on the degree or extent of automation possible. If you look at the spectrum of IPA, most people think of automation capability limited to action automation. This type of automation involves entering of data in some fields, clicking on some buttons on the screen, effectively actions that are very specific to interacting with the application screen. There are some business processes within the organization that involve this type of work. Almost 100% of this type of work can be automated. Think about automation as a spectrum of deterministic to probabilistic use cases. The action automation is on the far left of deterministic use cases. Deterministic processes form a big part of the BPO and KPO industry. There's a lot of interest across different industries to automate these type of tasks and have better control of the application and data as opposed to offshoring it. The next type of automation involves analysis. RPA today is capable of a lot of analysis as well as decision making. Rule-based decisions are pretty straightforward, but when you need to make subjective decisions, you often pair it up with a cognitive solution. There's a lot of advancement in the field of AI, both with perception and cognition. The final piece on the IPA are self-learning bots, which are again a case of cognitive automation. Well, it goes without saying that there are some challenges with cognitive automation, not with the technology itself, but with cases of generalization and hidden biases. I think the case where a bot made a decision to deny mortgage for someone is well known. Well, some of the work that's being done on the cognitive automation side is to reduce some of these hidden biases and get us to a point where the cognitive piece of the bot is effectively bias-free.
So as part of our technology ecosystem, we really are looking at how best we can leverage the best of breed from various technology vendors who are spending their intellectual capital to create new opportunities for developing of unstructured data to structured data. You think OCR, ICR, for example, taking documents and bringing them into text form, video manipulation and management, analysis of the data itself. All these types of things are very important to an organization, but without being able to access that back-end data that's in your legacy systems or across multiple systems, you end up with pockets of analysis, pockets of data, which really makes it difficult for your organization as a whole to take advantage of this automation as a straight-through type of process.
Well, the other important aspect that needs to be understood is the whole data revolution, right? So if you look at the data aspect, you'll find that we are already at a point where managing data is overwhelming. Look at the volume of emails that you receive in a day. It is becoming increasingly difficult to, at least for me, to keep up pace with all my emails. Data volumes are growing exponentially. There are estimates of the growth in unstructured data of about 650% year over year. It is well known that about 90% of your enterprise data is unstructured, and only a fraction of it is being currently analyzed. With the advancement of technology and the whole digital revolution, we are already at a point where the current operating model is no more sustainable. RPA fits right at the center of this disruption. Banking is a classic example. If you go back a couple of decades, you only had a single touch point with a bank, and that was through the retail branches. Most of the transaction processing was local. With the advancement of technology and the fact that you can transact with a bank in several ways, online, credit card, Apple Pay, the volume of transactions has increased multifold. This has given way to new retail banking models, and more retail banks are finding RPA at the center of their transformational journey. Well, on the industry side, if you look at technology advancement, I think there's general consensus now that we are in the fourth industrial revolution, which is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between physical, digital, and biological spheres. Radically cheap computational power, near endless amounts of data, unprecedented advancement in deep learning. All of this are enabling organizations to use smart machines to adapt and solve problems. The big question and the challenge that we have is how do we tap into this network? And RPA is gaining popularity as a foundational system to connect different platforms and technologies to deliver results for the enterprise. If you look at what connected intelligence future looks like, you'll find that businesses are building connected intelligence experiences from eradicating repetitive tasks, which is effectively what RPA does, but is also assisting in the implementation and adoption of insight generation and amplifying human intelligence, which are the other two important aspects or outcomes of the connected intelligence age. The last but not the least aspect of popularity of RPA are the market forces. Depressed commodity prices and the fintech pressure on capital market firms and banks are all leading to a point where organizations are realizing that the existing model is not sustainable and are looking for answers. RPA has existed for a long time, but this is one of the big reasons of why it is gaining so much popularity and widespread adoption.
So all of this leads to some boardroom discussions. If we're doing things the same way, how can we be moving forward? How can we be doing something differently in order to capitalize on the new technologies and really accelerate our growth and reduce our costs? How do we do that? So in these boardrooms across America and across the world, these same types of conversations are being had by the various types of CXOs there. So in this case here, we've got COOs, CFOs, CEOs. They're all asking similar types of questions. How do we work differently? How can we do these things in a different way to accelerate our growth without having to worry about our technology deficits that we've had over the years? We're having competitors grow on us and beat us at our own game. How can we change that? How can we do things differently? And these are, as we look at this, the concept of managing a digital workforce, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, how many people are going to lose their job as the robots take over? And really, it's a valid question, but it's also been one that's been answered pretty succinctly. So a couple of years back, London School of Economics came out with a book that really addressed this question head on. And they looked at a number of different organizations who were working through their digital transformation, leveraging a digital workforce. And as they looked into it, they realized it really wasn't about dropping the hammer and taking out people. It really was more about how can we take out the pieces of the pieces of work that people don't want to do, and bring those into a more streamlined type of environment where having these robotic workers do the drudgery that no one really wants to do, and allowing the people to focus on the more important work of actually running the business. And what was found is that as these organizations adopted the technology, the people in the organizations embraced the robots. They named them. They found a way to say, listen, I did all this work throughout the day that I really didn't care to do because I was at the mercy of the back-end systems and the supporting them the way our legacy transformation never happened. So here we are doing this swivel chair activity between various systems to move data around and manage the same process. These robots then took some of that work off of them so they could go back to the higher level analysis. I have 30 years of experience. I'm looking into this. How do I manage to move forward and do things differently if all I'm doing all day long is moving spreadsheet data around? So as these organizations took in there, they found that a portion of the time that they were taking was being taken off by these robots. They were able to focus on it. So they didn't lose any jobs per se. They lost they removed that time burden on them that the robots took off them. So the way we look at it is how many hours are returned back to the business by the way these digital workforces are coming into play. And a couple examples we have here. O2 is a cell phone company. And they brought in their digital workforce, and they started working on their back-end processes to permit them to run up to 280,000 hours back to the business on an annual basis based on the processes they already had in place. And this is a pretty key understanding here. So I've been asked all the time at these various organizations, well, if I go into, do I need to really optimize the process first? Do I need to spend the 18 months to 2 years going through step by step and leaning it out? Many companies have already done that, or looking to squeeze out more, but some have never even adopted that or haven't looked at every single process under that kind of microscope. And when they do, they say, well, if I do that, I'm not going to get any benefit for quite some time. And that's probably true. The benefit with going into a digital transformation, taking the current processes, you may be able to squeeze out those hours right now, even if the process itself has not been optimized, and get that hours returned back to the business so your folks are more productive right now. Therefore, you get return on your investment much more quickly. And you do this at scale. So if you look at the NPower example, every year they're returning 2 million hours back to their business. That's pretty significant. That's 1,000 FTEs worth of work. Now, it's not 1,000 FTEs who lost their job, but it's the amount of work that workforce is producing on their behalf. So as companies look to do more with less, they're able to now leverage this digital workforce in ways that they never knew they could before, because before people had to do this, and people take time. And allowing machines to do what they're good at, which is these repetitive processes, really gets that activity streamlined in a way that they can really squeeze out that time out of the processes that they're working on. So when you look at robotic process automation, there's 3 basic ways to look at it. Again, that London School of Economics kind of codified it in these 3 basic types. One of them is a desktop recorder automation. You can think of this as a sidekick to your desktop. If you're sitting working on your desktop with your Microsoft Excel and Word and your Outlook and whatnot, these are applications that you're used to interacting with. But in order to streamline the work that you're doing, you may have a macro within Excel, or you may have a various types of hotkeys that you can work at within a call center environment. That allows you to streamline your personal work at your desktop that you're doing. Again, lots of benefit to it, but it's not really scalable. It's taking out small bits of work that you're doing on your desktop and being able to extremely focus those into a very small amount of time, but it's only for you. It's not for anyone else. When you go to the IT developed type of environment, you have a much more robust and high throughput kind of automation. Typically, those systems are developed and maintained by the IT teams. And those IT teams, as you might know, have a very, very deep waiting list before you can get to allow them to work on your project. So getting to that project may take you a long time to do that, but the reality is it will be a very robust system. It may be quite expensive, but it'll work the way you expect it to among a very few number of systems, because that's typically how those automations work. I can make automations between very specific systems doing very specific work at industrial scale, which is great, but again, very limited. Then you have this digital workforce platform, which lets you elevate the discussion and say, I'm going to take it, I can work this from a dual side of things, which you have IT working at the platform side and operations managing the workflow, allowing that digital workforce to support the transition of that work from an IT-based burden of automation to now allowing the subject matter experts to support that activity as they go forward. So as you look at RPA in general, sometimes people have these concerns about, well, it's going to take over my job, or something's going to happen, or whatnot. What kind of concerns do you have as you're looking at your RPA journey moving forward? Especially since some of you have now discussed the fact that you're just starting out, there probably are some concerns. And the folks that have created their proof of concepts out there, are you running into any issues that you're seeing? I'll give you a few seconds before we move on. So as we see, it's like reliability is a big issue, but it's across the board. There's general security issues, scalability, and whatnot. These are all valid concerns as you look at moving forward with a digital workforce. So as you start looking at, well, if I'm going to do this at scale, and I'm going to make sure it's reliable, what things do I have to ensure moving forward? Well, that scalability component is definitely a key. Doing work at a desktop and automating even your work by 50% is amazing. But if it only works on your desktop and only automates 50% of the work that you do, the rest of the organization may not necessarily see that same kind of benefit. From a resilience perspective, as you rely more and more upon these types of activities that the robots are doing, can your robotic process automation platform support work that's going to be like an IT environment where you rely on it every day? Or is this something that, again, as a desktop perspective, if your desktop is off or you're not logged into it, is that really going to be resilient to do the work that you expect to do overnight or through a power outage? When you're doing the work through a robotic process automation platform, the work is being done in the background. What are the robots really doing? How can you validate what's happening through that robotic process so that during an audit you can validate this is what happened, this is what the robot did, and I can show exactly what was done step by step to ensure that an auditor would be satisfied with the work that's being done, and they could validate that there's not something happening behind the scenes that wouldn't be desired. And certainly from a security perspective, if robots are off doing a bunch of work, can we make sure that someone else isn't controlling those robots? How do we validate that this is a way that we can do work without worrying about it being engineered against us? So as we look at it, we see a bunch of different things that IT is really good at. IT is really good at keeping things stable. Their whole concept of running their enterprise back-end infrastructure is to allow the thousands and thousands of workers within the organization to be able to get their work done. So they're very, very concerned about stability and security and governance, as they should be. They've had enough years of experience to make sure that they understand what the implications of not doing that are. On the opposite side, though, the business operations team need a lot more flexibility. How can we do things differently quickly? Because I can't wait for IT to keep up with me. I can't make sure that I'm staying in the game with our competitors if IT is holding me back from our legacy systems. But the reality is those legacy systems are very stable. And so moving to a new system to be able to support additional digital transformation can be seen as a risk by IT. So how do you marry those two together? Well, by introducing a digital workforce as a platform, similar to a shared drive, your organization already uses a shared drive. Your teams that are on the ground right now in IT support this great platform for sharing files within your organization, and that's the platform that they maintain and manage and govern and secure. But every single file is not actually being worked through IT. All of the folks in the operations team, they manage the Excel and the Word and the PDF files that they're doing on a daily basis. So those activities that are identified as part of the working of the business itself are being handled by the business and just managed and stored and governed by the IT. That's where we see the best type of platform falling in. Certainly Blue Prism has designed our platform in that way to allow IT to do what they do best, maintain a stable system. So creating a stable workforce of these digital workers is really important. But allowing the business operations team to control how the work is being done, because they know how the work is done right now. They can train new workers coming in. They can train robots to do the same type of work or parts of that work and allow that stable platform to execute it going forward. So it's really the best of both worlds, getting that work done in a new way. But to do that, you need to have someone who's got some vision, who can see that, I bet there's a different way that we can do this. I see that there's this automation spectrum that Amit mentioned earlier, where we have the execution platform, and then we've got this cognitive thing going forward. How do we get that involved in our organization? Because I see that we have all kinds of benefit associated with that. What else can we be doing? Well, you need people to come around you to be able to support that. They say, I see this vision, I understand where we're going with it, so let's build a center of excellence. This organization that can internally bridge the gap between the various functional areas and IT to come together to learn how to do this in a better way. Taking that governance that IT is really, really good at and marrying it with the workflows that the business is really working towards. That gives you this new delivery methodology of taking how I train my workers, whether they're human or robots, and bringing that into this paradigm of asking the question first, is this work that we should have people do? Is this work that we should have our robots do? And then build that in as a service model so that an ongoing basis of maintaining that work as it goes forward. But you need a technology platform to be able to support that whole spectrum, whether it's from the execution angle or through the cognitive. You have to understand how technology is going to support your vision as you're moving forward. So it's great to have robots working autonomously, and they go off and do their work, and it's wonderful. But it's in a onesie-twosie, it's not really going to be all that impactful to the business. So you really need to learn how to start scaling that. And as you start scaling, that's where you start seeing the benefit. And as you mentioned in our poll here, we saw a good portion of you, over a third of you, were really concerned about scaling. How is this going to scale? How are we going to manage this type of workforce at scale? That's part of that technology platform, understanding how the platform itself can manage to be able to build this workforce at scale, because onesie-twosie is not going to cut it as a global change. But as you have this workforce coming in that's multidisciplined, it's not just one functional area, it's every functional area that can benefit from this. You really get that concept of moving into a new digital transformation era. This is pretty important because as we see, there's many different channels by which we talk with our clients. And as that information comes in from them and that data comes in and those products and services are offered to our clients, all of a sudden you've got an overwhelming number of folks in their front and back office that are starting to work very hard to keep up with the various products and services that are being offered in these various formats through the various channels. Not only that, but the back-end people, the folks in your risk and supply chain, your IT folks, those are the ones on that back end who need to support all those functions. Those are the teams that typically are asked to do more with less. So not only do we have that front-end pressure to do more, but now we have the back-end pressure to do more with less. And that's where the digital workforce really come in, to allow you to streamline that transactional type of processing in a different way, allowing your workforce to be working harder as a digital workforce, and allowing the people, the personnel within your organization to focus on that customer service and that customer experience, allowing you to grow more rapidly.
And just to add on, the front and back office labor pools are the most expensive for organizations. Efficiencies in these areas will lead to companies focusing more on products and services as opposed to transactional lifecycle management. And that's the whole idea of RPA. If you look at the benefits of RPA, broadly speaking, there are two broad buckets of benefits. One is the productivity and the other is value addition. I think the productivity bucket is well understood, and people are slowly getting an understanding of the value addition as well. On the productivity side, if you look at scalability, scalability is key. You have the assistance of robots to get scale on demand. This is key for spike demand and processes that are only relevant for a small portion of the day, week, or month. A common example is the month-end close process. There are certain activities that you perform only once a month, and having a digital workforce with RPA is going to assist in completing the task, not just on time, but in almost all cases faster than humans. This leads to the applicability of the technology where time compression leads to value. Some of the examples of time compression are important on customer-facing engagements, especially things like onboarding, providing faster response to customer queries, or in cases of logistics, where time directly equates to money. If you can dispatch your fleet faster or capitalize the opportunity that exists faster, then it leads to direct value generation. Efficiency is well understood, and the fact that a bot can run 24/7 is frankly a moot point. One important aspect of RPA on productivity is the ability to get rid of human errors, especially if the task is repetitive. I don't know how many of you have faced this situation, but I have definitely faced this situation where I ended up updating my address in a system only to realize that my address didn't get updated correctly. So this is the case where there are several systems within the enterprise that needs to be synced up when you update your address online. And when we did this analysis for one of the banks, we had a situation where the customer address had to be updated more than 20 times in different applications with no auto-sync capability. The cost of managing those exceptions when the address is not updated in all systems correctly runs in millions of dollars a year. These accuracy issues can all be resolved using RPA. Another example that comes to mind especially in case of manual error reduction is the case where we ended up automating an invoice process for a fuel retailer who also happens to own a bunch of food franchises. What we found out was that the store managers were updating invoices for burger patties under fries. And the reason was that the food items are seasonal and change so frequently that it leads to a situation where you don't have the correct data to match. Well, guess what? All your forecast and analytics went for a toss if you ended up in that situation. On the value addition piece, there are quite a few cases where RPA is not only providing information about business process challenges and information about bottlenecks in the process so that you can streamline the process, but also providing information on system and application usage, which is helping in application and release management.
One of the discussions that we talked about earlier too was that concept of the data being key to the environment, and access to the data that's in those legacy systems is critical. So as Amit was mentioning, this is something that's really important as you have the right data coming at the right time, and doing that in a way that your subject matter experts can really support that kind of engagement.
Well, if you look at all the organizations who have implemented RPA, they can broadly be bucketed in three categories. Initialization, where you are experimenting with the technology, getting used to the idea of RPA, understanding the building blocks, and I feel most of the audience in this webinar falls under that bucket. And then there are definitely, when you implement and do initialization, there are some cost savings associated with it, but the intent is mostly to understand the building blocks. The next phase of automation is industrialization, which involves doing RPA top-down. And a key aspect of popularity with RPA is the quick return on investment when it is planned and executed the right way. And clients, some of the clients are seeing a payback period of less than 12 months and cost takeout up to 60%. And the return of investment increases multifold when you institutionalize the process and expand it to all areas of the enterprise. And in many cases, marry it with cognitive automation. Well, thank you. That brings me to the end of the presentation. Whether you're thinking about starting RPA or in any of the phases from initialization to institutionalization, together with Blue Prism, we can assist you with the journey. At Sapient, we have more than 25 years of experience in business process engineering and design, change management and technology. Our teams have the breadth and depth of experience to assist you in your RPA journey. Please reach out in case of any further questions, and I think we'll open up for questions now.
Right. As I look into one of our questions we have here is one about culture, and the culture of bringing in robots, and how does that work, and how would we manage that type of change? It is a big culture change, but it's also one that has to be managed from the top down. As you look at it from a bottom-up perspective, bringing in technology, oftentimes you'll look at it as technology-type tools going into it, and oftentimes those tools, if that messaging or that concept isn't laid out the right way, it could look very threatening. But as you bring in a new workforce, instead of the concept of outsourcing, where this is a one-for-one removal of a job here and putting it somewhere else so that your job is completely affected 100% and you're no longer in it. This is more of an outsourcing type of activity that outsources the work that is repetitive, that you don't necessarily need to do or want to do anymore. So as we mentioned, some of the examples that the London School of Economics have identified is seeing that embracing of the technology, rather than the shunning of it or the fear that goes along with the concept of having robots take over my world and take over my job. It really is, the robots are going to take over the stuff that I hate doing anyway. So this is actually a good thing, bringing in a robotic workforce, but it has to be coming with that same kind of concept of this is not here to replace you, it's here to replace the things you don't want to do anyway.
Yeah, and just to add on, I think one of our leads who heads the digital strategy definitely talks about culture and the whole idea that culture eats strategy for lunch. Culture is effectively a movement and not a mandate, and that has to be thought through, right? So if you mandate it top down, it won't work. It has to be a movement within the enterprise.
Good question on is RPA an intermediate step, or is this going to be something that's going to slow down development of the other activities from the legacy, moving off the legacy systems? it can be looked at that. I've had a couple of discussions with folks saying that this is the Band-Aid. All you're doing is taking a Band-Aid and allowing us to leave those legacy systems, limping along as we try to move forward ever more quickly. And the reality is that the transition from legacy systems to AI, there's a massive gap there, a very large chasm that has to be leaped across. And the problem with that is that as most of these organizations have these huge investments in legacy systems, that chasm only gets larger. So how do we bridge that gap? Well, using a robotic workforce to kind of take the edge off and allow you to create a temporary bridge, if you will, across there will allow your organization to buy some time as they start reviewing what that system needs to look like. So replacing legacy systems is a 2 to 5 year to 10-year type of process. If we're going to look at this and remove the mainframes because we don't want them anymore, we remove these ancient homegrown applications that were at the core of the way we do business. How do we get off of that now and transition to something else when it takes us 2 to 5 years just to do the testing efforts to make sure that it's reliable enough to work with? So yes, it's a Band-Aid if you look at it that way, but it's also this bridge to this new way of doing work and allows your organization to take this concept of leveraging this repetitive type of work and do it now in a different type of way with your legacy systems as you're planning for what that future may look like. So another one question here is having the robot center of excellence in IT versus maybe somewhere else. The way we look at this is working with IT to support IT and the business working together. So as we look at IT in general, I came from an infrastructure background for many years, and being in that kind of role, I understand where IT could be the enabler or it could be the one who held back the organization. And it really is that concept of how do we bring that IT back to the enabler forefront. So the Center of Excellence that we suggest from a build-out perspective is incorporating all the functional areas with IT as part of a description of a healthy Center of Excellence in an organization. That allows that organization then to have new dialogue that doesn't really exist. IT tends to be one of the few parts of the organization that spans functions within the teams. And as part of that, most of these teams don't talk to each other about how they're managing their technology or how they're managing their automations. Bringing this kind of forum together where IT is part of the group that can describe how this new function can be built and capability can be leveraged across functionalities can allow that discussion to be had across that group and across those teams.
Yeah, and Center of Excellence is an interesting conversation, right? So there are different ways of constructing Center of Excellence, be it federated, be it centralized, or a combination of both. There are different approaches depending upon the organizational needs, and there are different components of Center of Excellence and the type of activities that Center of Excellence should be involved in. And all of that is part of the strategy and assessment of RPA, and it's critical when you're embarking on the RPA journey to set it up correctly.
So one of the questions here was regarding the extent of process customization required before deploying a robot. And the reality is that if you're building a platform that you have to change the process to allow the robot to function on it, you're going to be at a disadvantage. With the Blue Prism platform, you're doing just the opposite. You're taking your current processes now and you're leveraging what you have in place right now to automate what's in place right now. As I mentioned earlier, you can look at a future state, and it may be good for you to go in and take a look at these processes and lean them out or change them as you're developing the new automation for it. But the reality is that the longer that you push off automating any kind of process by looking at the optimization, the less time you're going to have available to support that automation right now, the less benefit you'll get right now. So I wouldn't say that you wouldn't want to change processes, because oftentimes we see organizations changing processes as they're moving forward. And we had a customer of ours describe that themselves. They said, as we went into this, we had never looked at some of the processes we looked at before. So just going in by looking at the processes that have been around forever and no one's questioned, this is the way we've always done business. How can we automate what we've always done? Just by looking at it, they realize that the thought process or the concepts behind where that process lied were no longer valid. So they were able to actually take out some processes that they had been doing as an organization for decades and remove them completely, because no one had thought to look at them from a top-down method and say, do we need this? Should we be doing this? And by simply going through and say, let's automate this, they opened up the process and talked to the experts that understood that process the best to realize that this process was no longer necessary because of the systems that had come in after the fact. And you don't need an automated process that you can remove. So you get 100% return immediately on that type of work. So just the concept of looking at the process themselves is a benefit as you move forward in this automation journey.
Yeah, and a lot of times I think some of the clients are realizing the benefit of understanding the bottlenecks in the processes, right? So you wouldn't know why a process takes 5 days if it takes 5 days today, and what are the bottlenecks, what are the types of exceptions that you have, right? By going through this journey, I think one of the benefits that clients realize is a better understanding of the process itself, a better understanding of all the bottlenecks in the process, and being able to manage those in a better way so that you can streamline and re-engineer the process and make it more efficient.
Another question related to the customer-facing interactions regarding, how are customers and on the end user side, so there's customers of yours that are interacting, how are their reactions as if they're working with an AI or an RPA platform? Hopefully they won't know. That's the concept behind this. Hopefully they won't know what's behind this, but what they will know is they'll see a streamlined activity allowing them to have better customer experience rather than the weight associated with interacting with a number of different departments as you try to process an order or understand what the shipping components are. Building that into your customer experience, how can we engage our customers more directly? How can we help them to be self-serviced more directly in a way that's secure so that when a customer is looking up an order or is going through this type of thing, maybe we can avoid having a phone call to one of our call centers to start with. If you avoid those phone calls coming in, I don't need to have anybody, any AI platform to support that internally to do some magic voice recognition or sentiment analysis type of thing, because I've avoided it completely, allowing the customer to be able to see that interaction with our customer, our base as a positive experience to start with. I want to do business with this company because they care about me. They're personalizing my experience because now they can. They have all the history behind my purchases. You see like Amazon or whatnot. They provide all these new services to you that you weren't even expecting because they know your purchase history. Taking that into account, now you have this concept of the back end working in your favor rather than simply automating your processes. It's really improving customer experience.
Yeah, and as Michael said, I think one of the biggest advancements in AI is the whole idea of personalizing experiences for people, right? So be it real world things that you use, things like your phone or TV viewing, right? So if you're watching Netflix, you get a personalized experience based on your behavior and your buying patterns. Same thing with customers on the customer services side as well. We're seeing a lot of adoption of personalization and customization tailor-made to your specific needs. And the other thing that's happening with the advancement of RPA and AI and utilizing it for customer services in the area of customer services is the aspect where you're getting faster response times. If you've ever been on the phone waiting for a customer agent, or if you used voice recognition in the past, which is fairly frustrating, that experience is changing. So there are various modes of communication now, from text-to-text chatbots, voice-to-text, as well as even like visual plus voice combination of both of these together to give an experience which is fairly rich and customized and very personalized.
So because we know a number of you are just getting started in this whole process, one of the questions is very appropriate, and that is, how do I get started? How do I know what a good process is to start automating? If I look at the processes that we have or I may be aware of, where do I start? So certainly being familiar with a particular functional area within your organization is a good thing because you know a little bit more about what happens there. But even on a top-down perspective, if you were to look at it from a consultant's view coming in, how do I look at an organization? Typically you look at where do you have the most people doing work? That tends to lead to the fact that there's a lot of activity happening there. So things that are processes that are very high transaction volume, that tend to go across multiple systems, tend to be the ones that we look at first. And why is that? Because as you have this high transaction volume, there's a need for some kind of streamline, some kind of automation to support that volume because typically volumes continue to go up as you do more business. So how can we manage that in a more efficient way? And then as those processes that across multiple systems are involved, that typically leads to that whole swivel chair mentality of I'm going from one system, taking data to another system, making some kind of calculation or some kind of decision process as I move to the next system to enter the data. That not only leads to manual errors, we're all human, and as humans, we tend to make finger check errors when we start typing things in, and that's to be expected. By having robots doing that type of work, now you really have a data to data kind of interface, pulling the data from one system, leaving it in a structured format, and putting it in another system so that it's unvarnished by the human interaction from a keyboard. So taking those high volume transactions across multiple systems tends to be the best place to start. So one of the questions is related to self-learning robots. And I don't disagree that that's where we're going for at some point in the future. I would say at this point in time, self-learning is probably not where we want to go. If you remember the Microsoft Tay debacle on the internet, Microsoft opened up their AI chatbot and let it learn by talking with folks on the internet. Well, as you might imagine, the internet is full of all kinds of people. And a lot of the people who had the time and energy to go and spend talking with Tay developed some very interesting habits within Tay. So within a few hours, they ended up shutting Tay down because it became a hateful, bigot AI chatbot. That's not what we want to do from a self-learning perspective. However, with that said, machine learning can provide all kinds of new insights into how we do our work so that by guiding that machine learning internally, you can improve your processes internally. You can improve the way your customers experience your organization externally because now you have new insights to be able to manage that. And taking that machine learning and funneling it into the process change to allow your execution platform to be adopting those new learnings or those new insights makes perfect sense. But to me, that's a monitored or mentored type of learning rather than a self-learning type of activity for the exact opposite or exact reason why Microsoft pulled that off there. You don't want to have the data determining how your robots interact because the data may not be good. It may not have enough samples to be able to identify what is real and what's not real and may be skewed based on the limited data sets that it has available to it.
Yeah, and what we are seeing is, at least on the machine learning side, huge applicability for BPO operations, especially call center operations, where effectively the problems are very, very similar. So you can apply machine learning to be able to understand patterns, understand what worked, what didn't work, and then tailor-make your solutions accordingly using a cognitive solution on top of it. In some cases where you don't have enough information or data, there's a combination of machine learning and causal and semantic reasoning, which is, again, an area of AI which is still under development. But the idea is you can have a cognitive solution which understands things, real-world things like a human does, and as opposed to interpreting from data, can reason things. And I would say we're probably halfway there. It'll take us some time before it becomes mainstream, probably in the next few years.
Another question here relates to the development of the processes and the applications themselves. So as you have this life cycle of application development, how do they tie back with the constant changes that are happening within the organization. And that's where that Center of Excellence comes in. It's one thing to have IT managing their SAP upgrade projects and whatnot to be able to support that. But as you tie in the Center of Excellence, the process owners, those people within the Center of Excellence who understand the way the automations are tying back to those applications are involved at the beginning. Hey, we're seeing this upgrade process happening for our SAP. How is that going to affect the automations that you've done right now? So that concept of constant change is now brought back into the business owners rather than them being told, oh, by the way, next weekend you're going to be trained on the new version of SAP that's going to be rolling out. It becomes a much earlier in the life cycle, so it's a constant cycle of that life cycle management, but now it's deeper in the organization rather than simply staying within the IT teams.
Yeah. Cool. I think one of the questions is to describe how marrying RPA with cognitive has worked in our experiences, and what are the common examples that we have seen. So one example that we worked on recently was to automate the overall pipeline notice information. So there's a huge network of gas pipelines in North America, and it directly impacts the electricity generation for a large ISO. And the ISO is supposed to monitor these notices, and they come from disparate sources and very different formats, very difficult for a human to comprehend and understand the impact. So we automated all of that process using RPA, but married it with cognitive automation to be able to learn and predict outages based on a set of criteria. So if the weather decreases by, say, 5 degrees, then there is an impact, and these are the pipeline points that will get impacted. So those type of solutions are very prevalent, but the first step is, of course, to get all of this information utilizing RPA in a system so that you can marry it with cognitive solutions to increase your horizon of visibility.
Yeah, I would agree. And one of the questions kind of follows on to what you just said, and that is, as we look at this, is it just RPA doing this, or is it really a suite of new technologies that we can marry as part of this? And I think it really is a suite of products, because you have the execution layer from an RPA perspective, as it is able to interact with the legacy and new systems and manage your data in different ways. But again, getting those insights from the AI and cognitive solutions will really allow you to advance the way that you do business, and again, the customer experience and how the customers relate to you in a different way. So it's not just RPA to be able to replace 100 people or 200 people or 1,000 people. That's really not what the concept is. The concept is, I have these systems in the back end that are inefficient, and they've grown wildly over time based on the way we've grown as a business. And the fact is that 20 years ago, these systems were put in place to address specific problems, which are very different now. So RPA can help smooth out some of that, but it also gives you this new concept of, as an execution layer, being able to add in those cognitive components to really expand and springboard that organization forward.
Yeah. I think we're nearly out of time. I'll take the last question, and this is about how do we budget for RPA. I think one of the important aspects of budgeting is to understand what are the processes that you have today, right? So strategy and assessment is key in terms of understanding what will it take for you to do a top-down RPA. I think initialization is relatively easy. You can probably budget it and say, I would do probably 2 to 5 processes or maybe 10 processes to start with to understand the building blocks of RPA. But where it gets tricky is when you're thinking about a big transformation utilizing RPA, things like BPO operations, automating the entire BPO operations or automating your entire back office operation. All of that requires careful thinking and design, and it will require some sort of strategy and assessment, and there are various building blocks of the robotic operating model, from vision, strategy to technology, that needs to be thought through in order to basically budget and come up with a plan. Cool. I think we are out of time now. Over to you, Alice.
Excellent. Yeah, just looking at the time real quick, looks like that's about all the time that we have for today's session and for the Q&A session. I just wanted to take a moment to thank our speakers, Ahmed and Michael. Thank you so much for hosting today's session. And also a big thank you to our audience for submitting through numerous questions and responding to the polling inquiries. We saw a bunch of questions come through that unfortunately we just were not able to get to within the hour webinar, but we will definitely be following up shortly to continue on with the conversation. We have a very short survey set up as a closing of this webinar, which we would definitely encourage you to participate in. And we also saw a few questions coming through asking about on-demand recording or a copy of the slide deck, and the answer is yes. You'll be receiving access to the presentation in about 24 hours, so keep an eye out from an email directly from On24. It'll give you instructions on how to access the on-demand recording. So from Sapient Global Markets and the FEMA team here at Worldwide Business Research and WBR Insights, we thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Until next time.